Welcome to Channel 8 News. We bring you the news so you don't have to find it. With Ron Burgundy, Veronica Corningstone, Brian Fantana, and Brick Tamland.
Welcome to Channel 8 News. My name is Ron Burgundy with tonight's report. Tonight's broadcast brings us an update on the abolition movement and two very important people, William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass. William Lloyd Garrison, a printer from Boston, Massachusetts, worked for Benjamin Lundy, a well-known Quaker who published our first anti-slavery newspaper in America. Moral suasion is used heavily by Garrison on the public through his own newspaper, The Liberator. Garrison is now considered by many people a radicalist, wanting to enact emancipation immediately and Congress to extend full political and social rights to African Americans. Very strange for a white man. Garrison's influence has been unreal, with his American Anti-Slavery Society having now 150,000 members. They are saying slaves opposing most Americans' ideals of religion. Frederick Douglass, a man born a slave who escaped into the North recently, just shared his story at an abolitionist convention, creating turmoil with the release of his book, an autobiography. President Lincoln has appointed him as an advisor. Now we go to Brick Tamland.
In recent news, the Southerners claim that slavery is not an abomination, as the abolitionists are declaring, but is supported by Christianity and is a favor to the slaves who could not survive without the slaveholders. Last week in Philadelphia, a wedding which both whites and blacks attended infuriated the villagers, who responded violently.
We are gathered here today for marriage.
It's so
Do you
cute.
take part as your lawfully wedded wife?
What? There's blacks and whites in attendance here?
Do you take
This
part
is an
as your
outrage!
lawfully wedded
Burn down the
wife?
anti-slavery meeting hall!
Thank you. On to other news. Emily Ugabu, an enslaved African American, escapes her harsh life in the South and is here to tell her story.
Welcome, Emily. So, what were you forced to do as a slave?
Well, we were forced to cultivate cotton in the hot sun every day.
It's heartbreaking. So, were you with your husband?
No, we were separating on our first day here in this country.
It must be very hard to keep family ties.
Yes, it is, but we do manage through traditions passed down through stories.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing your story. Back to you, Ron.
And now another interview with a former slave, James Hawthorne.
Welcome, James. We're so glad you could join us today.
Thank you, Veronica. I'm glad to be here and share my story, which represents the lives of millions of mistreated slaves across the southern United States.
Yes, and we're also glad you're willing to help all of our viewers understand the cruelty so many slaves have been forced to endure. Why don't you tell us about how you escaped from slavery?
It was dangerous and risky work. As many people as there are who want to hurt us, there are many who want to help us. And with their help, I escaped through the Underground Railroad.
What were your tasks as a working slave?
Since I was so small, I could not do the hard manual labor that most of the men did. I had to cook for the family, but I could never eat what I made, and I would try to sneak crumbs of the food, but my owner caught me sometimes, and I'd be whipped and beaten.
Wow, that's terrible. No human being should be treated that way.
It made me feel as if I was no better than an animal, but what was worse is that sometimes the food wasn't satisfactory in their minds, and my owner would threaten to separate me from my wife.
How did you bear it?
It was hard, but my religion pushed me through it, and it still does.
Well, we're so happy you were able to escape your hardships, and hope all slaves have something to comfort them as they struggle through their tribulations. Back to you, Ron.
This just in, breaking news. Now we're going to Brian Fantana to cover the story.
Thanks, Ron. Nat Turner, a slave who recently led a revolt through the countryside near Richmond, Virginia, has been captured. The slave taught himself to read the Bible, and it is believed that Turner had thought he had received a sign from God to lead slaves to freedom. Already, consequences can be seen throughout the South. Slaves are now often forbidden to gather unless an overseer is present. And now, an interview with George Smith. Here by my side, I have George Smith, a white slave owner from Virginia. Tell us, George, what are your recent thoughts on this revolt led by Nat Turner?
Well, when I heard the news, I was shocked, of course. I heard this Nat person, along with his followers, nearly killed 60 people before we could stop him. I'm just glad he was captured.
That's right. After a 6 weeks chase, Nat Turner was finally captured, along with his other associates. How do you think this will affect future relationships between slave owners and slaves?
For sure, I will never allow my slaves to get a hold of a Bible. People say this Nat Turner could read the Bible and believed it to be a prophet. We will have to pass more stringent laws regarding slavery, in my opinion.
Back to you, Ron.
In recent news, there has been a problem with discrimination against Jews and Catholics. Last week, we discussed the riots of the Protestants against Catholics and how they yelled, "Down with Popery," believing that Catholics would be more devoted to the Pope than to the country. That's nothing compared to the religious discrimination that's occurred this week. Just yesterday, a man by the name of Ezra Frank attempted to run for office in Pennsylvania, but was banned from running when it was discovered that he was Jewish. It seems the discrimination will never end.
Stay classy, Olivia.